What's up, guys? It's KB. Make sure you subscribe to the Underground Sports Philadelphia YouTube channel. Click the bell icon down below so you don't miss a single video from us. And thanks for tuning in to another video from Underground Sports Philadelphia. Now let's get into it.
Philadelphia, baby, you're going to love it. Best sports fans in the world. Actually, the worst, but that's what makes them the best.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome into episode number 604 of Underground Sports Philadelphia, presented by the City of Vineland. It's KB and Matt coming at you with a little remote setup tonight as we mourn the 2023-2024 Eagles season. Did Jason Kelce really retire? And we've got some fun and interesting locker room quotes from today as the media met with the Eagles. We got some Phillies updates. Obviously, the Sixers, as Patrick Beverly would say, the belt-to-ass tour continues on. And the Flyers continue to stay hot. And right around the corner is the Union season. So we'll talk a little Union as well towards the end of the episode. But make sure, before we get into everything, you guys are following us on the socials at Underground PHI. On Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Facebook.com/UndergroundSportsPHI, which we are live on right now. So you can be watching us live on Facebook. And, of course, Twitch.tv/UndergroundSportsPHI. You can follow Matt on Twitter at Matt Castorina. You can follow me at KBIZZL311. Subscribe to the podcast feed on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Leave a 5-star rating and review. It does go a long way for helping this show continue to grow, helps our entire network grow, and lets us do more dope things for and with you guys, and allows us to hit new milestones. So be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts in audio form, and subscribe to the Underground Sports Philadelphia YouTube channel, youtube.com/@UndergroundSportsPhiladelphia. It's where you get full video episodes of this show twice a week, full video episodes of every show on our network, live streams, shorts, clips, original video content. It's all on our YouTube channel. Go subscribe. We're at 719 subscribers, trying to get to 800 before the end of the month. February quickly approaching, so let's keep the numbers rolling and get to 800. As the more and more milestones we hit on YouTube, the better this show does, the better all of our shows do, and that means we get to continue doing awesome stuff with you guys and for you guys across the board. And of course, this show is sponsored by the City of Vineland and the City of Vineland Municipal Calendar. Features city-organized, city-sponsored, and city-affiliated events that are of public interest. The calendar, which is accessible at vinelandcity.org, is a good way for residents and visitors to build awareness, remain engaged with city government, and participate in local events. You can also follow the City of Vineland on social media via their Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube pages. And through these tools, you can stay connected to the community and get important announcements about programs and services offered by the city. Vineland, New Jersey, where it's always growing season. And big thank you to Security 21 Security Systems and Paul J. Gillespie Incorporated for their continued support of this podcast. Matt, what's going on, brother?
I'm living the dream.
The Philadelphia Eagles' nightmare of a season has come to a close. It is brought to you by our awesome merch partners at PHI Apparel Company, where you can gear up for the Sixers, the Flyers, the Phillies, the Union, and maybe for next season, the Philadelphia Eagles, where they have the best merch in the game to help you stand out in the crowd and have everybody asking, where the hell did you get that shirt? Well, it's from PHI Apparel Company. They also have exclusive Underground Sports Philadelphia podcast merch, like the hoodie I'm wearing right now. If you're watching on YouTube, you can snag that bad boy up. And all of our podcasts on our network have exclusive merch at PHI Apparel Company. So when you're ready to rock and roll for whatever season it may be, go to phiapparel.co. And when you go to checkout, use code UNDERGROUND for 10% off your order. It's the most effective and direct way to support everything we're doing here at Underground Sports Philadelphia. So go get your merch, phiapparel.co, and use code UNDERGROUND for 10% off your order. The Eagles season has come to a close, Matt, a long, arduous, and tumultuous season at that, as they fall to the Bucs in disastrous fashion. Baker Mayfield continues his Zin in Pocket tour, and the Birds are now in a position where there's a lot of questions swirling around this team, from coaching to players retiring to players coming back, and I think it's more questions than what we've seen in the recent history of the Philadelphia Eagles ending a season with.
Yeah, honestly, it's kind of like watching a really cringy episode of TV that you watched like maybe on the premiere, and then you go back and you're doing a rewatch and you get to you're like, oh, I forgot how bad this was, and then you're sort of reminded of the fact that yeah, this was always here. I don't know that we had a ton of faith in this team beating the Buccaneers. I personally bet against the Eagles because I said it
Why
a million
wouldn't you?
times that there was yeah. I mean, honestly, I this team was obviously so ready to lose, and there's only one team that I thought that could have made the NFC playoffs that I would have actually expected the Eagles to beat, and that would have been the Saints. Um, but even them, just defensively, this team just did not have it. They're very lucky that the Buccaneers could not, hold on to catches or, convert on some of these third and fourth down things. Like this game could have been completely out of reach, by the first half, and it was kind of in a way, it sucked because it felt like you were just being strung along for the entire game, and that like it was, there's a possibility of a comeback, and it just was never really there.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the way that this season unfolded, and you tough out some wins early in the year. The best win of the season was against the Dolphins, the only double-digit victory of the year. And then as the season progressed, it's like, wow, we got lucky to beat this team. Wow, we hung on in overtime to beat that team. Wow, Jake Elliott kicked the field goal of his life in the rain to beat the Bills, and from there on out, it just felt like a panic mode for this team. We talked about it when it happened, like at 10-1, and you're switching defensive coordinators, and ultimately, it feels like that's what kind of cost you the season when you're trying to cover up what the real problem was, which was your offensive scheme and the way that your offense was operating. In the post-game press conference after the Bucs game, Nick Sirianni talking about, well, we scored 9 points on offense, and the number one screenshot of a play rolling around was 3rd and 2, and Jalen Hurts has a blitz right in his face, and none of the receivers are facing the ball. Nobody's in the middle of the field to protect Jalen Hurts from getting absolutely crushed. And that's what happened all season. And it's pretty sad that this offense, you can have people putting fake stats out there about the wide receiver screens this year, and you kind of have to question whether or not they're real.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that this team just made no adjustments. And that's where we get into like the long-term discussions about, what happens, with Sirianni, is this team just didn't make any adjustments at all. In fact, they got worse. They just got worse as the year went on. And I would really love to get down to the Matt Patricia thing, like whose decision that was, because I think whoever choice that was should be fired or sell the team. I think it's one of the most indefensible things I've ever seen in Philadelphia sports, and I'm not exaggerating.
Mm-hmm.
I've never in my life, if you want to bring him on as an advisor or whatever, I think it's dumb. I don't know what you could possibly gain from this guy, but we also know that the NFL and a lot of other sports are just like the boys' club. And if a few people like you always find your way into a job somewhere, someone will pay you a meal ticket just for whatever reason. The fact that they didn't even have the courage to actually, it kind of gets leaked out by a national reporter on like a random Sunday afternoon when they were playing the next day. And they never really even said that Desai was demoted, that Patricia was the defensive coordinator. Like the whole thing just reeks, and it's disgusting. And whatever decision that was, honestly, should not have a job. There's no defense for it. It is one of the most puzzling things I've ever seen. And yeah, that's where you get into Sirianni, and the things about the blitzes, and you have Jay Gruden, publicly, and he's not wrong either. That's the thing too. It's like you're making me agree with Jay Gruden. That's shocking. It's
the Eagles were so bad that they started a Jay Gruden, Robert Griffin III Twitter beef.
Yeah, well, I think Robert Griffin III was like, yeah, what about protecting your quarterback? Because I don't remember it happening that way either, and I was like 16, 17 years old. I don't remember Jay Gruden protecting Robert Griffin III. In fact, I remember that being complete opposite, but that's a different situation. I just, we talked like a few weeks ago about the end of the season and what it would look like if Sirianni wasn't here, and we talked even last week about that. And I think we felt he'd probably get another year. And I didn't think that that was unfair, and that he's gone to the playoffs 3 straight years, has had winning seasons on all of those years, was at the Super Bowl last year. I sit here today without trying to be reactionary. If I like, my honest opinion is I don't know that you can bring him back. I don't know how you bring back a guy that seemingly doesn't have an answer, and if he's the one at the heart of the Matt Patricia choice too, like that's double time for me. I don't know that you can. Can you give him the car keys again? I think it's a really complicated issue though too. Because I don't think you want to be known as an organization, and I think this is where you can run into some trouble if you're the Eagles, where guy did bring you to the Super Bowl last year. That earns you equity in this league. And I think high-level coaches or promising coaches will look at your situation and be like, how do I know if I make the Super Bowl next year that I'm not going to be out of a job the next year? Like, that's a real concern I would have if I'm a potential coach, or if I'm the agent of that potential coach. Like, it's totally possible that this just goes sideways, and Howie Roseman's somehow going to survive this potential coach firing. We've gone back and forth over time doing the show about his ability, his inability, things like that. He's a high risk, high reward type of GM. Maybe you got to look at that. I don't know. Like, I think this end of season has brought on more existential questions than I expected it to.
Yeah, and I mean, you're getting, on the day of a game, national and local news dumps about the finger pointing in the Eagles locker room and getting out ahead of it even before the first ball is snapped. And it's like, this just reeks of a loss, having this leak out hours before game time when you're about to play a playoff game. And then after the game, you have media members asking Jalen Hurts if he wants Nick Sirianni back, and he's like, I didn't know he was going anywhere. And then today, I don't know if you saw this, NBC Sports Philadelphia put out the clip, or it was on NBC Sports Philadelphia when they had exit interviews with the media. Fletcher Cox called Jeff McClain a clown to his face, because Jeff McClain asked if Sirianni's going to be back, and he was like, you a clown, bro. Get out of my face. That's where we're at with this team.
Yeah, I think for me, there are some like higher profile guys that seemingly like support Sirianni, and that's a feather in his cap. However, I would say that it was older guys too. And that's where I almost wonder, maybe because he's been a guy, I don't know. It's so hard to parse through some of these things, and some of the logistics, like between like what happens in the locker room, who's upset with who. It's very clear to me that there was more than just this team not playing well. Like, it was more than just bad coaching. I do think, and this is again where you start getting into these existential questions. Where's Jalen Hurts in all this? His greatest strength is supposed to be that he's a culture guy, he's a values guy, he's a hard work guy. I'm not questioning those attributes that he has personally. But when you're paying a guy $50 million a year, and it's very easy in a year that you win, 13, 14 games to go to a Super Bowl, that's your mantra. I would have liked this year, when this team faced real adversity, to feel, at least as a fan, that there was something from Jalen Hurts. I'm not trying to pin this on him, but like, these are questions that I don't think we expected to ask ourselves. But and I think the Jalen one is very far down that list, but I don't think anyone is walking out of this clean. I don't think there's a single player besides like Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown that I'm like, yeah, you didn't do anything wrong. I don't know. What could you have done? DeAndre Swift, like, I really, like, who escapes this season without any kind of question of like, well,
Jake Elliott.
Yeah, Jake Elliott, honestly. Yeah, Jake Elliott might be – he really might be the only one.
Yeah, I mean, I watched the post-game press conference with Jalen, and this season – and like you said, like, Jalen's the furthest to blame, I think, in a lot of this. There's way more questions surrounding coaching, coordinators, people in the building that are in the front office before you even think about knocking on the Jalen Hurts door. I think Jalen's final press conference after the game against the Bucs was his best of the year, and that's kind of odd to say, because it felt like in so many different games Jalen was keeping a lot of things like close to the vest, which, sure, you want to do that. It makes a lot of sense. You don't want to put too much out there as the quarterback. You're kind of being the silent leader and allowing yourself to carry yourself that way. And I think Jalen's leadership is a lot different than a lot of quarterbacks in the league, and that's totally fine because you've seen Jalen Hurts perform at a high level and it works. But Jalen was very telling, very hard on his sleeve in that final press conference, and I liked that in a situation where they were. You just got blown out in a playoff game. Season didn't go the way you wanted it to, and not that you expect any less from him, but it was nice to see that from your quarterback, that you are paying that franchise quarterback money to, that you are expecting to be a leader on this team. And I think that was telling moving forward that Jalen wants to see this team succeed, wants to do whatever it takes to win, and that's kind of been his whole thing from the beginning of getting drafted here is like, I want to win more than anything for the city of Philadelphia. He said that after the Bills game when they won that overtime game. And, you see the guys that have stuck up for Sirianni. It's the guys that you want on this team. It's the Jalen Hurts, the A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, DeAndre Swift, and then, Jason Kelce, Fletcher Cox, Jordan Mailata. Like, the faces of this team seem to really want Sirianni here, but have also acknowledged that things are going to have to change for them to continue to be successful. And I think one of the big telling things that, at least defensively, we saw this year was when the 49ers were coming to town and Javon Hargrave is giving interviews saying, practice was almost like a vacation when I was with the Eagles. Practice here it's a grind, it's a dogfight, and you can see the difference. The Eagles this year, you've seen Pop Warner teams tackle better than the Eagles did. Every other team, they're wrapping up, they're getting hard hits. This Eagles team, it was like they were almost afraid of tackling, especially down the stretch. And you have to attribute that to a defensive coordinator, quote unquote, change, where you have so many mixed messages and you're trying to figure out whose, message and whose scheme am I trying to implement here. You saw the defense absolutely crumble down the stretch. And the number one thing was the offense never changed. And like you said, adjustments were never made offensively. And it was the same old song and dance outside of the one game against the Dolphins.
Yeah. And I mean, even then the Dolphins, we talk about another team that just kind of had a little bit on fraud watch, a team that couldn't. Funnily enough, I think the Eagles had one of the worst defensive performances that in terms of like a top team playing against the Dolphins.
And that game too featured the ref that made the blown call in the Lions-Cowboys game, where that ref called 10 penalties on the Dolphins and none against the Eagles.
Yeah. I think we joked like a month and a half ago, like when we were talking about the Vikings season last season, where they were in all these one-score games and everyone called them a fraud. It's like, well, maybe the Eagles are a little more, and yeah, I think especially the defensive effort to me says two things. It says coaching, and also I think these guys just kind of weren't in it, in the final weeks of the season. I think you could feel it, and I think you could feel it in that playoff game. Troy Aikman was saying, pretty early in the game, like, they don't want to be here. And that's
it was
shocking.
Like a soft strike almost. Like you were almost watching players on strike out in that game.
Yeah, I mean It's crazy that they were the most Cancun team out of all the teams to play this weekend. And that is really surprising to me. It's the vibes and the energy around this team were honestly worse. It's one of the worst I can remember, honestly. And I think what's shocking about it too is you've seen teams suffer like real terrible injury luck, like going into the playoffs, and have way more about them and way more fight, way more dog, and even just like publicly, like the way the fans treat it, the way reporters talk about it, the way even national people are talking about it is way more positive than the Eagles, who, by the way, were almost completely healthy coming into this. A.J. Brown obviously is the big miss, and I don't know that he does not fix this. It's not even he does not fix that game. But outside of that, it's not like this team was like
he had like two big injuries. It was him and Blankenship.
And that's I'm sorry, but if those are the reason you can't beat what is honestly like one of the most average NFL teams. I mean, you're on the road, granted, but they're just an average NFL team.
They were 9-8
by like almost every metric. Like they're just average guys. I don't know what to tell you. Like it's that I think is a thing. And again, just when we look at the offseason and the big picture stuff, what happens with Sirianni, he has to have some good answers on how it got to this point. and what steps he took to try and mitigate this disaster. Because I'm going to tell you, like from the outside looking in, it doesn't look like anything was attempted. And I think that is a huge indictment. It is one thing I think everyone expected, I think in some sense, a regression from last year. You had so much change, especially in the coordinators. It's always going to be a year for growth. And it was always going to be a year. I think it was always just going to be hard to get back. It's hard for every team that makes the Super Bowl, that wins the Super Bowl, to get back to that kind of place. Look at the Chiefs, right? I know they've moved on to the next round, but it's one of their worst, if not their worst, Mahomes season. But I just think that it got so out of control at the end, and this team just absolute collapse at the end of the season. Someone has to answer for that at the end of the day, and you have to trust. I think if you're Laurie and Roseman, that Sirianni is the guy to oversee that you get your choice. That they'll choose whatever coordinators and whatever. But we've also seen that go poorly with Doug Peterson, a way more, I think, happy-go-lucky kind of guy, a little bit more like, just put me on the open water and I'll find my way. Like he was upset about kind of losing control of coordinators and not having that voice. So Sirianni is a little bit more of like a fiery character. I don't know how that is going to work. It just, again, there's existential questions that I did not expect to be asking about the Eagles.
And I mean, maybe we have an answer defensively, because this just came across my timeline. This is from Andrew DeCecco. He was speaking with Darius Slay, and this is Slay's quote on the midseason defensive coordinator change. Man, this might be an all-time Philly sports athlete quote. Quote, "It's tough. It's real tough, learning two new identities. It's like having two marriages. You know how hard two marriages would be? Handling the personalities of two women? No offense to the women in here. One might want her feet rubbed. One might want her shoulders rubbed. That's crazy."
It's a great analogy, and I in like other reporting I've heard this too, that like Desai was apparently like, it was just like a complicated defense, and he was clearly like smart and had answers, but that it was guys like felt that they were having to overthink while playing, and then you switch to Patricia, who just again, I'm not trying to bury Patricia, but I don't know why he is in this position. I don't understand it. It is truly the worst. He puts that stupid pencil behind his ear
with a laminated play sheet.
The play sheet is laminated. You got a Microsoft Surface Pro, brother, and I don't even think the eraser works as a stylus on those things. I don't even know if that's the type of. It looks like a carpenter pencil, like the one that doesn't even have an eraser. Like, what are we doing? Why do you have that? What is like?
And yet that guy's supposed to have like a rocket science degree.
You know what? Listen, there's a lot of dumb people that get rocket science degrees. All right, like it's not. It does not automatically make you a genius when you do stuff like that. It's just, to me, that's the worst of the bunch, and I don't know. It's a lot of questions. I think too, like how Roseman should be facing some questions, because listen, he builds the roster, right? He gets all the credit last year for this team and having one of the most talented rosters that we've seen. He should also be getting some blame, and again, that's part of what you have to ride with Howie Roseman is you're gonna have highs, you're gonna have lows with him. I don't know that this strategy that he has about defensive spending is tenable anymore. I really don't. I'm not trying to be like prisoner of the moment and all that, but I just don't know that in a league now where defense gets harder and harder every year. Nick Saban was just saying that, like, and granted it's college, but I think it's a general trend in football in general. It's like, yeah, if you're a defensive coach, you're Al Qaeda, you're a Taliban, like you're outlaw. You're not like, honestly, you are not going to win that way anymore. It's a different world, and I think when you are so willing to skirt on some positions defensively, a Kyle Shanahan is going to rip you to shreds every single time now. Like, that's just the way the NFL is moving. Is like, you will get exploited time and time again. And that happened to the Eagles last year. It's one of the least talked about underpinnings of why that team did not win last year, is because they could not defensively cope with elite quarterback play. Not every team can, but teams can do it better than the Eagles did last year, and certainly better than the Eagles did this year. Like that is a real concern of mine going forward, is maybe this strategy needs addressing. I don't know that it's something that's going to change, though. I think this is just how Roseman values, and that's just what you're going to have to roll with. But I think in a league now where you have head coaches that are all think of the best coaches right now. If you could
We just
just
saw
pick
Bill
anyone,
Belichick get fired.
right? And also think of the best head coaches right now that are currently acting. A lot of them are play calling head coaches. A lot of these guys are great offensive minds. There's not that many. Bill Belichick was like one of the last great defensive coaches. It's not coming. You look at the hottest jobs right now, the hottest candidates for jobs. Everyone wants an offensive coordinator, and they want it off the Shanahan tree. They want it off the McVay tree. That's what's in right now. There's one defensive guy that I think is going to be everyone's like cup of tea, and it's Mike McDonald, and that's it. Like it's just D'Amico Ryans last year was someone that I think defensively minded, but brings Bobby Sloak with him.
And I think it also
that,
changes because D'Amico is a former player too,
right.
So he gets that benefit of the doubt of like, I played against offenses, so I kind of know the lay of the land. Plus, he came from Kyle Shanahan.
Right. So I just think that that's something. If you want to win a Super Bowl, maybe it needs more dressing. I don't know. That's
Who do
something
you think
to
the
think
top
about.
5 coaches in the league are right now?
Top 5 coaches in no particular order. I would say, I think Sean McVay has to be up there. I think Harbaugh has to be up there. I think Shanahan,
Andy Reid,
Mike McCarthy, Matt LaFleur, I think.
I was going to say Matt LaFleur.
That's not even prisoner of the moment. I said that before the season when I picked the Packers to win the division.
He came close.
I think Matt LaFleur does not get nearly enough credit, and a lot of that is because he had Aaron Rodgers, of course, but I think he's great, and I think he's shown that through the course of the season how it's the youngest team to do this, and they're just amazing. Who would my number 5 be?
Andy Reid?
Yeah, Andy Reid. That's the obvious one.
I think Dan Campbell's a close one.
Dan Campbell, I would like to see another few years before he and they're gonna have. I think it's same with Sirianni too, though. Dan Campbell's I think a great analog for Sirianni last year, where it's like he has this kind of personality. I think he has this cult of personality. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that in a positive way. Like he seems to really people buy in. He creates buy-in, and that's really important. I've said this time and time again about all sports. Head coaches, 80% of their job is being a boss, is being a manager. And think of the qualities and traits that you like in a direct supervisor, a manager, a boss, whoever. That's what you need to be. You need to be like someone who can just talk to people and get them to buy into stuff.
Look at what it did for the Phillies.
It's a massive part of the job that I think maybe now people are starting to understand is actually really important. Like it's not enough to just be super smart. You can delegate that. I don't think Dan Campbell is the most cutting edge analytic minded person, right? And he definitely, with things like fourth down and going for it, like definitely so. But I don't know that this is the guy that's an offensive genius, defensive guru. I think he understands those things and knows when to delegate it to people that understand it better than him. And that's important. That's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. That's a great, skill to have. I do wonder, they're going to get rated this offseason in the same way that the Eagles did. And that's a huge adjustment to come back from. And I think that's when you talk about some of the great coaches and the great teams, it's so hard to do that. And that's why I give a lot of credit to someone like Kyle Shanahan, right? It's like every year this guy's losing coordinators, he's losing people, and it just doesn't matter. Like it just doesn't matter. For the longest time, it didn't matter for the Patriots, when they lost people. In fact, the people that left sucked and then came back and were great again. Players too. Like it's that to me is the mark of a lot of success. And that's where the Eagles fell short this year was making those adjustments.
I think this is a telling quote to Dan Gelson from the Associated Press. Brandon Graham laughing in the locker room, quote, "Y'all ain't getting nothing today. All the bad stuff's been reported already."
Yeah. It's weird that you had that article come out. You're talking about Jalen and the offense and Sirianni's control over the offense the day of the game. That was interesting to see that the day of. That is normally a day after, type of thing after they're already eliminated. But there's truth there, clearly. There's a story there. And again, if you talk about Sirianni being in or out, you look at that story and you start to think like, we brought up Jalen and some of his performances this year, and part of that I think was his injury, but part of that is also maybe he doesn't trust his offense. Maybe he doesn't feel like this is the offense that's going to work for him. Now, at the end of the day, you got to be professional and suck it up, but I don't know. It's going to be an interesting offseason for sure, and this team has a lot of questions to answer.
Yeah, and I think the big question is number 62 hanging it up? Adam Schefter doing what Adam Schefter does and maybe jumping the gun a little bit like he did with Tom Brady. Yesterday, reporting that Jason Kelce informed teammates that he's retiring. Everybody on social media goes crazy, bringing up all the Jason Kelce accolades of his career, moments, and everything. And then on New Heights today, it basically trickled down. Jason Kelce said, "When the time comes, you'll hear it from me."
Yeah. Well, I hope he pulls a Brady and just out of pure spite, it's like, actually, I'm good. I'm coming back.
Pulls the Vince Carter. I got one more in me.
It's just kind of, yeah, it kind of sucks, like we live in this age too, where it's like all about that first scoop and, what is, I think, a probably like really powerful moment, when you decide like, yeah, I'm done. Like I think that kind of gets taken away from you as a player and, gets thrown to this like ambulance chasing hack. It just kind of sucks. It kind of sucks that like, he doesn't get to make that choice now. Like it's already decided for him. And now when he makes it, it's like, yeah, we know. It's like, well, I don't, yeah, I would be very frustrated in his position that's kind of where you end up because it's like it gets taken away from you. Like this is like the last time you get to do this, and it's a big milestone to say too. And so, yeah, it kind of sucks. If he is in fact done, which it does seem is very likely to happen, one of the best offensive linemen I've ever seen. I think definitely, revolutionized the center position, what he can do athletically, what he can do mentally. Very, very rare combination of those things and just a great player. Iron Man as well, like just all around. Very, very hard to replace type of guy. And I think, again, when you're talking about the to-do list for the Eagles this offseason, now they've done well, I think, over the last few years, like trying to constantly replenish the offensive line. But still, I don't think you find any kind of replacement for someone like this. It's a Hall of Famer. You don't ever really do that.
I mean, to go from a 6th-round pick in the end of the Andy Reid era, go through the Chip Kelly era, wins a Super Bowl with Doug Peterson, now in the Sirianni era, you don't see many 6th-round picks surviving that long in general, no matter what the position is. And obviously, Jason Kelce and, oddly enough, Tom Brady are two of the exceptions to that rule. But, like, at a position that is such a grind and such a physical toll on your body, like, he also said on New Heights that, like, this was the first year that, like, his body still hurt on Wednesdays. So, like, to go through that grind, and obviously this year so, magnified on the tush push and everything that goes into that play from his position, and, to be an offensive lineman and be so beloved, not only by your teammates, not only by coaches, not only by other players around the league, but you don't see many teams, fans, having an offensive lineman's jersey flooding the stadium. You see number 62s in midnight green, white, black, and Kelly green every single game, every single tailgate. I think that's the most telling, is that being a 6th-round pick, being a guy who gave 110% every single day in practice, every single game, he's so relatable. And I think that's what makes Jason Kelce that much greater, is that the average everyday person can relate to Jason Kelce, being somebody who just wants to be amazing at their craft, no matter what it is. And he embraced Philadelphia from the jump. And I think everyone loved an offensive lineman with long flowing hair at the time, to the giant beard, and then the many hairstyle changes that Jason Kelce had, to then recording Christmas albums and all the charity that he gives back with the Eagles Autism Foundation and Team 62 and everything that he does, in the off seasons charity-wise, and then obviously starts the podcast with Travis. And I think Jason Kelce just became like this figure that everyone found a way to relate to him. And Jason Kelce is truly the epitome of your favorite player's favorite player.
Yeah, and I think too, like obviously his Super Bowl speech, I think really cemented him as kind of a like a character, outside of the game, and yeah, he has like the sea isle stuff in the summers, like he just, yeah, I think really ingratiated himself a lot into just the community and people's minds, and yeah, really really hard player to replace, and I'm sure too, uh, you talk about veteran leadership and things like that and setting the tone. It's another guy too that's potentially at the door that not easy to replace. We talked about it with Schwarber and the Phillies. By all accounts, Schwarber brought a lot of energy to the Phillies team and a lot of discipline too, and a lot of just like but good camaraderie, like just a great person to have around. Jason Kelce seems to fit the same box. Like that is not an easy person in any sense to replace, and you can't put a figure on like that type of just personality and like what that brings and that discipline, that professionalism, like that stuff really matters. You talked about it with Jalen Carter getting drafted, and the Eagles liked that they had good guys around that they felt they could guide him along. Like if you start to lose some of those pieces, then it gets harder to make swings like that, or it gets harder to kind of just continually have this progress and this development. And so it's a big loss.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at the way Jason Kelce also like just made his mark on every other team in the city. Like World Series, he's on the field with the Fanatic, like chugging beers down the third baseline. He's banging the drum at a Union game. He's ringing the bell at a Sixers game. He's at Flyers games, getting ready to hype up the crowd. They use Jason Kelce on the Jumbotron at Citizens Bank Park, in late innings to get everyone fired up. Like, he's just such a fixture. And it makes you think, like, not only in our lifetime, but just overall, like, there's an argument to be had that Jason Kelce is, like, on that, hypothetical Mount Rushmore of Philadelphia athletes of all time.
Yeah, he's up there for sure. He's like I said, irreplaceable kind of guy.
And I think he's the first guy that, people have their thoughts on whether or not Donovan McNabb should have had his number retired by the Eagles. I think he's the first guy since Brian Dawkins that truly has like that unanimous, like, retire his jersey the moment he officially declares his retirement. Like, nobody should ever wear number 62 ever again.
Yeah, I agree.
Brandon Graham said that he wants to come back next year if the Eagles will have him and make it his farewell tour. He said it's always been his goal to play 15 seasons. And then I think the other part of the quote was more telling to me, was that he said once he hangs up the cleats, he wants to go work in the front office for the Eagles, kind of a Connor Barwin path, and be part of the front office and be part of the next generation of this franchise. I think that is, one of those things that everyone talks about. Philadelphia is this tough city to play in. It's a place that nobody wants to go, and we've obviously seen over the past few years of not only just doing this podcast, but like even before then, seeing players say like, I wanted to go play in Philadelphia. Brandon Graham wanting to stay in Philadelphia and work for the team is the ultimate tell-all story, because nobody wanted Brandon Graham here in the first place when the Eagles drafted him in 2010. Everyone wanted Earl Thomas because Brian Dawkins just left. You needed a new safety, and then you go draft the defensive lineman who's kind of undersized from Michigan. And Brandon Graham has turned into a franchise icon, and now he wants to, go work with Howie and the rest of the front office. I think that is the ultimate, like, Philadelphia is one of the coolest places to play because you can have a story like Brandon Graham.
Yeah, absolutely too. And he said he has he might have one more year in him too, like playing wise. And he said he wants to like approach it with the knowledge that it's his last year. So I mean, he was ultimately too, when you talk about the game itself against Tampa Bay, he's probably one of the only players that I think played well. So
yeah, him and Fletcher Cox, oddly enough, had fantastic games. I think ultimately next year, sure, you'll eventually have to have the changing of the guard. You bring Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox back on a 1-year deal. And we said it last year when it was happening. It's like, you give them 1-year deals until they're ready to retire. Same thing with Jason Kelce. They've been franchise cornerstones. And it's so rare in any sport to see guys wear one uniform for their entire career. These guys have cemented themselves, obviously, by winning a Super Bowl here as franchise legends. But if they're all able, and you include Lane Johnson in that conversation too, where he said he feels like he has multiple years left in the tank, which I agree. Those four in particular, like, make sure that they don't end their career in another jersey.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree.
If you had to put a marker on it, where would you say your percentage for Sirianni being back is at right now versus if he's gone?
I lean. Oh man, I'm gonna say I think he is. There's a 55% chance that he's here next year. I think it's more likely than not. But I think if you had asked me that question 2 weeks ago, I would have said like 95.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the fact that we're sitting here, and I think we are in. You know, we talked a few weeks ago, maybe even longer at this point. Who knows? It all blends together about the Falcons, about Arthur Smith. We were just talking about coaches that could be fired, and you had brought up Arthur Smith, and I said, well, you know, there was the report that week before about how his job is safe unless it was a disastrous end of the season, and it was, and he was fired. He was actually the first coach fired, you know, in kind of that end of season, you know, layoffs. Sirianni, I think it's the same kind of thing. You know, it's just, it's one thing to have, if this is just the way it had gone, if you had just said, like this is how the end of the season is going to go, be like, wow, that's tough. If you just had no context, no scores, if you just said you're going to lose 6 out of the last 7 and you're going to lose on the road in the wild card round, you say, that's a pretty tough scene. I don't know that you would have said Sirianni's getting fired, but when you see it in context and you see just the way this team devolved over the course of the year, I think there are a lot of questions to answer now. I still think it's likely that he's back next year, like more likely than not. But it's there's a higher part of me now that thinks like, yeah, he might not be. Like, and maybe this is the year to do it too, because there's so many options available. However, I do think what we brought up earlier is important to keep in mind is you don't want to be the organization too, though, that has a kind of reputation for, you know, Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl, was out within a few years. You know, like, you don't want to be a guy that gets you to a Super Bowl and the next year is out of a job like that. It's a tough thing to balance, but yeah, it's more likely than I thought.
I have a fun exercise here. Before we get to it, it's brought to you by our pals over at FOCO. You guys saw the velour tracksuits all out and about. The overalls, they've got them for every team. You saw me rocking the Phillies ones all baseball season. They've got the fun like home run hats that Bryce Harper was wearing a couple years ago. Just the best collectibles, the best apparel that you can think of to support your favorite teams, from baseball to football to hockey to basketball, soccer, entertainment, the whole 9 yards. They've got you covered. Click the link in the description and grab your forever collectibles today. Foco.com. Shout out to Foco for sponsoring the podcast. Matt, this is from CBS Sports. They've got the 15 best or most available head coaching candidates going into next year. You tell me if you want the candidate or if you'd rather have Nick Sirianni back for the Eagles. So number 1 on their list, obviously, pedigree alone, is Bill Belichick.
I'm out on Belichick. I think he's washed. I'm not interested.
Number 2 is the multi-million-dollar man, Ben Johnson from the Detroit Lions.
Yes, because I think he's a better play caller.
Number 3, national champion, head coach of Michigan, Jim Harbaugh.
Way too weird. I just think he's way too weird. No, thank you.
Number 4 on this list, no way in hell he's going to be the head coach of this team, Brian Johnson.
No, thank you.
Number 5, Dan Quinn.
No shot.
Number 6, Lou Anarumo, who is the defensive coordinator of the Cincinnati Bengals.
He was a really hot candidate last year if he had come out. Defensively, they lost pieces. I'm okay. I think if you make a move, I would like to see an offensive-minded head coach.
Number 7 is Bobby Slowick, the offensive coordinator of the Texans.
I think that's a big jump to make. he's like a future planning guy. This is a team that's ready to win right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's maybe a little too inexperienced. So I would say no.
Number 8 has already been hired, and that's Gerard Mayo.
Yeah.
Which, did you see the clip from his press conference today with Robert Kraft?
Was this him talk about seeing color and
pretty close. It was Robert Kraft mispronouncing his brother's name, and Gerard Mayo jokingly said, "Yeah, it's one of those black names. I'll help you learn it."
It's pretty good.
Number 9, defensive coordinator of the Minnesota Vikings, Brian Flores.
No thanks. Although if you could teach Jalen Hurts how to play against a blitz, it might be worth it.
Yeah. Number 10 is the current assistant coach and offensive coordinator and probably future head coach of his current team, the Washington Commanders, Eric Bieniemy.
That I think is a little interesting, and he's a guy to me that I think is flown under the radar because the fact that I'm hesitating, I think I might consider that actually.
Number 11, the defensive coordinator of the Baltimore Ravens, Mike McDonald.
That I think I could get into. That I think we could have a conversation about. Yeah, I think I would take McDonald.
Number 12, Mike Vrabel.
Yes. Yeah.
Number 13, the current defensive coordinator of the Carolina Panthers, Ejiro Evero.
He's an interesting name, and I think could be good. I don't know if he fits with timeline and direction of this team, but I do think he's someone maybe not this year, but next year we're talking about more.
Number 14 on this list is the current offensive coordinator of the Miami Dolphins, Frank Smith. Ultimate create a Coach Madden name.
No one has any clue what this guy does. Mike Patino's going to get all the credit for the offense all the time. So the fact that I can't tell you for sure that he's really the genius behind the Dolphins offense, which gets shut out by top defenses, I'm not so sure.
And number 15 on the list is the current offensive coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks, Shane Waldron.
No, thank you. No, thank you.
Yeah,
you know who's not on the list that I think would be interesting is Pete Carroll, because I know that it's kind of assumed that he's taking just a role within the Seahawks, but he was saying that he wanted to keep coaching.
Wanted to still coach.
And he's a vibes guy.
Big vibes guy. Big gum guy, too.
Reunite him with Rashad Penny and just...
I'm trying to think of any other.
We bring Russell
candidates.
Wilson as a backup because this team is obsessed with getting Russell Wilson, and he's going to get cut. And we have Russell Wilson, Jalen Hurts. Can you imagine that kind of hell? If we have a Russell Wilson, Jalen Hurts mini camp and training camp dilemma. Oh man, I just put something real evil into the world. I'm sorry.
I don't think Russell Wilson ends up in Philadelphia, but I think he ends up in Pennsylvania.
He sure as hell
he
might.
Screams Steelers quarterback next year.
He screams Steelers or Giants. Oh,
Steelers, 100%. Giants. There's another team. He also screams New England Patriots.
Yeah, I think like a new era. You know, you kind of you try some of that. Yeah, that is where like I think great quarterbacks for the 2010s go to die is the Patriots. Just join the Cam Newton conga line.
Which, hey, speaking of Cam Newton, he wasn't wrong in his little podcast clip that he put out.
No, he was not.
A lot of people gave Cam shit for that clip in the national.
They hated
media
Jesus
scape.
because he told the truth.
He was pretty spot on with those quarterbacks he listed.
I didn't think it was inflammatory at the time.
No.
And yeah, I mean that was the only I think salve for this weekend was that the Cowboys, one of the most embarrassing performances I've ever seen. Man, that felt good to watch. I'll say that.
And their collapse is far worse than the Eagles.
The Eagles, everyone knew
it was inevitable. You knew it was coming. You were just waiting.
I turned the game off for the first quarter. I was like, I'm going to bed. I'll catch the highlights.
The Cowboys, it's like, oh, you know, we won the division. You know, we have 9 all-pros on the team. Dak's in the MVP conversation. We
undefeated at home.
Deron Bland. And then you get absolutely shit-raced by the 7 seed. You're the first 2 seed to never make it to the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. You lose to the 7 seed for the first time in the NFL playoffs. The 7 seed advances in this new format.
I think the 7 seed had been outscored by, I think it was like 16 or 18 on average. And that was something to watch. I mean,
Aaron Jones had more touchdowns in that game than he had all regular season.
That's also, again, that's like one of the, I think, the youngest playoff team ever, too. It's not like, you know, it's not like the Rams went in there, right? It's like, well, yeah,
right.
They were really, I'm sorry. That's crazy. Because the scoreline at the end makes it look a lot better than it was. That was a monstrous blowout. That Musgrave touchdown. I've never in my life seen someone that open. And then they show the replay and you get like a wider view. There's literally not a Cowboy in the screen, and they're probably showing off maybe 35 yards like vertically and maybe about 20 horizontally. I don't see a single – I don't know what happened there. It's one of the most shocking things I've ever seen.
And then the replay of the Romeo Doubs touchdown where Romeo Doubs just like Naruto juked Stephon Gilmore into another dimension, and it was like, oh, buddy, like you just showed your age there a little bit, Stephon, because Romeo Doubs hit that move and just went a completely different direction, and Stephon Gilmore still ran like 5 yards in the direction he was going. I was like, holy shit, he just like sent him to another realm.
Yeah, talk about existential questions for the offseason. I mean, I still have faith in Jalen Hurts. I don't know if you could ride with that, but it was so funny. They had the clip of him talking about, well, if you're going to question Mike McCarthy, you know, you got to question me. It's like, okay,
all right,
yeah, we are.
We all have been.
Why don't you have a seat right there? Actually,
it's like the Homer Simpson meme. Like, have a seat. I mean, the fact that I was seeing Dak Prescott photoshops into Broncos jerseys was hilarious.
There's genuinely something with him in big moments that just does, and defensively too, they stunk, but he was playing awful too, and he gets very lucky with some of the garbage time stuff that it looks a little better on his end. If I'm his agent, I'm happy about that. But man, that was. You talk about the NFC East and just total embarrassment. I mean, God.
Insert the Joel Embiid quote from this season that he did on purpose. The lights were too bright. Dak has the worst playoff record of current quarterbacks in the NFL. He's 2-5.
I saw that the Packers have more playoff wins at AT&T Stadium than the Cowboys do. That is horrendous.
Like the Packers can say that AT&T Stadium is their home away from home.
I just saw Adam Schefter. This just in.
Oh, shit.
How timely is this, man? We could not have timed this any better. Dallas is not making a head coaching change, and Cowboys head coach Mike McCarthy is returning for the 2024 season.
Attaboy, Jerry. Attaboy, Jerry. Ago. Well done. I think it's a brilliant decision. I mean,
you got to stand by your guy.
12 wins in 3 straight years. You can't walk away from that.
No, you cannot.
It's a great move.
You think the guy who stuck with Jason Garrett for almost an entire decade was going to fire Mike McCarthy after 3 years?
I'm gonna give a Jason Garrett impression there, Jerry. I'm gonna clap on that one.
By the way, what an absolute kick in the teeth was it that you had to navigate to Peacock, one of the worst performing apps of my life. Every time I open Peacock, the sound is messed up, and I have to reset my whole TV. And then you load it up, and Jason goddamn Garrett talking to you. God Almighty.
Who, week by week, whenever he's on the broadcast and not in the studio, continues to more and more sound like Chris Collinsworth.
He's trying his very best.
His best.
It's like someone describing a color to you, and it's like, wow, I didn't need any of this. Could have done so much more with my time.
And it was in one of, I think the most entertaining part of that game was how cold it was.
Yeah, you have the Mahomes cracked
Yeah, shout out
cracked
to the
helmet.
Dolphins photographer who caught that picture because
It's a pretty. Have you seen this account on Twitter? It's like sports images that are art,
yes,
and so I discovered this for the first time over the weekend because the person behind the account took the Mahomes picture and like found some other thing. I gotta tell you, like how do I like? Why couldn't I have some weird
do you want to
skill like
know
that?
an even crazier part about that account? I would
It's
first of all, I'd
just
love to
off the
have that
dome,
off the dome. I'd love to
off the
have
dome.
the admin of that account on this show because we need to pick that brain. But it's off the dome, and that
Yeah,
is what makes that account that much more cool. Is that it's just art that person remembers seeing.
you could use a skill like that for evil. Like if
Yeah,
you have that kind of like memory and encyclopedia, like you could genuinely like the CAA could be training you like to do terrible things to people in the global south or something. You're like a genuine, like that's what they could be doing. Instead, they're giving us free content on Twitter where they're looking at funny pictures from sports and be like, that reminds me of this painting, actually. And it's like, that's great. I
it's
love
so
that
great.
that we have that. And people that don't think it's real have just not talked to enough people because there you will find people like that. It's like, wow, that's crazy that you can do that. But I believe it.
Yep, we would love to have sports as art on this show.
Who's our team now? Who are we
Oh,
who are
so
we?
yeah, we got to declare allegiance here. So we have the Ravens, obviously keeping it in the Bird Gang and Lamar. The Lions
Yeah.
are
Lions would
are
be
an
great.
option. We could be Stroud boys.
Stroud, yeah. Stroud would be up there for me. I think seeing the Texans. I just don't know if they have the juice to do it.
Yeah,
I don't, man.
and I mean D'Amico, former Eagle.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Um,
I
Bills,
think
Bills Mafia. It always
Bills I would love.
the Bills and Eagles fans feel like the gang allegiance meme where they're holding two bandanas up together. That's what Bills Mafia and Eagles fans feel like.
The Bills though, they feel like they're gonna have another heartbreaking loss. I hate that they have to play the Chiefs.
They're at home though. We finally get to see Patrick Mahomes not be an Arrowhead merchant.
Which by the way is disgusting. He's played 15 playoff games, including
He's
Super Bowls.
12 and
None of them have been
3.
on the road,
12-3 in 15 playoff games.
and
Peyton
none of them have
Manning
been on the road.
Peyton Manning got his 12th playoff win in his last season playing when he was like a corpse of himself with the Broncos.
It's disgusting. It's honestly disgusting. Yeah, I would actually. I think ranked in terms of like how happy I would be for the team. I think Bills and Ravens are my 1 and 2, and then Lions. I think those are
Yeah.
my top 3. So naturally, it's going to be a Chiefs 49ers Super Bowl,
Yep.
and it's just going to be no fun.
JFK has now missed 2 Lions playoff wins.
Well, that's if you really believe that.
It's
He's
true.
in that. Last I heard, he was in Cuba with Tupac. So
I also love the rap sheet tweet. Unbelievable scenes in Dallas, and everyone just quote tweeting it with JFK.
man, that's. I really can't get over that loss. It's
It's so great.
really it honestly it helped. It helped. I think the coping with the Eagles loss.
Yes,
It's like,
it
well,
alleviated the pain.
yeah, spoonful of sugar. Like helps
Yeah.
the.
We still have 2 South Jersey players in the playoffs too. Bo Melton with the Packers, and then obviously Isaiah Pacheco with the Chiefs. Which
Yeah,
the Isaiah Pacheco memes and hearing like national media talk about somebody that you know personally is just so funny. I saw a tweet that said Isaiah Pacheco runs like he's wearing these in gym class, and it was just those like big, like lunky Osiris boot looking shoes.
it's like they're half a size too big. It's like
Yeah.
not too big that they're still on your feet, but it's like you kind of have to do a high step because it's like you're kind of afraid of them falling. Your like toes are like curled up in them. You're like
With
digging
like
into the.
the girth of moon boots.
Yeah, honestly. Man, Osiris shoes were a terrible invention. It was one of the ugliest things I've ever seen in my
Osiris
life.
shoes and Sesame Street snapbacks
And
had a run in 2010.
yeah, unfortunately. I thankfully I don't think I ever got into Osiris. I did think they were cool, but I don't think I ever owned
Yeah.
a pair. But
Those
I
are-
was close
whoa,
to
those
making
are
that
bright.
mistake, I think. Yeah, I mean that's really all it was. They were bright and just big. It was like, well, that's cool, I think. So
Man. Yeah, that was like I don't even know what to compare them to now.
I think it's like the I see a lot of young boys with like people call it the broccoli cut. It's
Mm,
not quite a one for one because it's not like, but I think that's one thing. It's like I look at that, I'm like, man, you guys are gonna regret that haircut.
yeah.
You're gonna look back at those pictures and look at them like we looked at like frosted tips or something. You know, like,
Yeah.
it's like you're just the clothing. Talk about this with my wife actually. The clothes kids wear now is not as like awful as what we were like when they were at a similar age, and part of this, I believe, is because kids don't have a transition stage anymore. Like they live in such an online world that, and the like social media sites, all that stuff is like populated by like people our age and up. You know, like it's adults, and so they don't have that like weird space where they're on like websites made specifically for kids or anything like that. Like they just go straight to, you know, whatever like a 29-year-old is wearing, a 14-year-old is wearing. You know, like
Yeah.
it was never really that way. So I think they don't. I don't know that we could have an Osiris thing again. I would love for them. I know that they've taken over like Y2K clothing. I would love for them to try and bring back like double polo shirts with pop collars. Because if they can do that, then whatever. Like just give them the world. Like they've earned it. They've earned it all. But there's no way that you can bring that back and make it look cool. I just
Yeah.
refuse to believe that.
Yeah, kids these days didn't get to play the Lilo and Stitch sandwich stacker game, and it shows.
No, they were not on. They were not on cool math games, and I think that's a real moral failure. And I think we should do better to rectify that. But
We need
yeah,
to show them, just like have them like strapped in and watching just like uh flash time games like on mini clip.
I don't know what a child would do when if faced with those kinds of games today, and I don't blame them either because
I
I
think
gotta tell
they're
you, they're bad. I
yeah.
so I on my Switch I got the N64 pack, and you know with that is a lot of like N64 games. I played GoldenEye, Lord above. That game is awful. It's unplayable.
And it's
You
like
literally like
regarded
it,
as one of the best games ever.
and you cannot play it. It is so bad. It is so not friendly. The controls are awful. Everything about it is, besides the soundtrack, which goes way harder than it needs to. Um,
Yes.
every good memory you have of that game is 100% nostalgia. 100%. I had the same thoughts too, and I played the first level. It's like I can't, like, physically can't play this. I physically cannot.
Yeah, I mean, I can only quake in my boots thinking about kids right now trying to play RuneScape.
Yeah,
Which I recently learned they like revived the game and it's like still kind of looks the same, but it's like up to date and doesn't lag your computer to the ninth dimension of hell.
yeah. Your computer doesn't sound like I think it's gonna explode at any moment.
Um, we'll touch quick on the Sixers here as they continue the Belt to Ass tour. It's brought to you by Kenwood Beer, the official beer partner of Underground Sports Philadelphia. It's 4.1% ABV, just 120 calories, only 8 grams of carbs. You can go to kenwoodbeer.com and use the Kenny Finder to see who's got Kenwood Beer on tap in the Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Maryland, and New Jersey areas, and you can get it at your local liquor stores in those markets. Must be 21 or older to do so, and of course, please drink responsibly. Kevin Durant with one of the funniest tweets in recent memory of his saying, Joel only needs 3 quarters. That's crazy.
Yeah, great matchup last night. Yeah, last night against the Nuggets, and Jokic and Embiid both play. But Sixers are coming off a back-to-back. That's great, and Embiid's performance was great. I think got a lot more like national recognition for how he's played, which is fantastic. Um, it doesn't change the long-term way I feel about this team, but it does remind you of like this is kind of the peak that they can have, and when Embiid is
Mm,
playing this way, that they can beat anyone, and he can be an unstoppable force. And we hope that we see that in the playoffs. And so he has one of the best teams around him that he's had in his time as a Sixer. It also feels like we say that every year, but it really does feel like this year there's a lot of depth there. And so you just have to hope, I guess, that this is what we see in the playoffs. But he's playing great. He's playing better than he did last year. Was in MVP, and I wonder if we start to see that narrative change a little bit because maybe the Thunder haven't pulled away in a meaningful way, and Denver's kind of had an okay season rather than a great season. Jokic as well has had just another good year. He hasn't really taken the big step. So maybe Embiid does sneak another MVP. Who knows? But they're willing to forgive. I'm not. But I will see them in April before I really buy in.
Which last night too, after the game, Nikola Jokic, taking in Philadelphia's finest, went out to McGillen's after the game.
I'm trying to think of the funniest place you could put Nikola Jokic that, I'm imagining him trying to navigate, Reading Terminal Market, it's a little cramped in there. I'm imagining a big human trying to get around that space. That would be fun for me.
It's almost like the mouse trying to navigate the cheese in the old school science labs.
Yeah, it's that place is like sardines in a can. I just can't imagine Nikola Jokic. He could see everything. That's a good thing.
That's
he
true.
He wouldn't need to look at the map on the wall. He would know where everything is just by doing a quick scan. But good luck getting there. Imagine those tables are so tiny and they're all stacked together. Imagine Nikola Jokic probably takes up 4. Imagine an NBA team, even if it's just the Sixers at Reading Terminal Market. They probably take up every single table there. They're just that big, and the place there is just that small.
Definitely, Reading Terminal Market for an NBA team would be one of the more hilarious things to witness.
Sixers have a little. They have a little room there.
They do.
You can stand and eat your slop.
And they get to avoid the what will probably be hilarious max contract Pascal Siakam will get, as he will be headed to Indiana from Toronto in a 3-team trade that Woj broke.
Get ready to learn corn, buddy.
I don't know what that really does overall for the Pacers. Everybody in Woj's mentions talking about how the 2-man game with Siakam and Halliburton is going to be so much fun to watch. Sure, but I don't know how much needle movement that does for the Pacers overall in the East.
I think it can. I think too. Indiana's not a place that can attract free agents. Their possibilities of getting Siakam as a free agent are pretty low. But now you can lock him in and get bird rights, and you can pay him. I think it's $60-something million more than anyone else. So he's very likely to stay. I think it's fine to go all in on what is one of the most efficient offenses ever, right now with the Pacers, and try and add another piece for that. I don't mind getting competitive. You look at the East, outside of Boston, I don't know. I think you could convince yourself. This was a team that made the what do you call it? Whatever they're calling the in-season tournament. I need a better name than the in-season tournament. Give me something. Truth. Yeah, give me the whoever Memorial Tournament, something like that. But I don't know. I think you can convince yourself that you kind of get aggressive when you have a young team, and I don't mind it.
Yeah, and I think the other good thing for the Sixers to see was that Joel played back-to-back. That was nice to watch, because typically in the past, Joel sitting out that Rockets game and waiting for the Nuggets or vice versa, and it's he missed out on Embiid versus Jokic. But for him to play the back-to-back, I think was a big thing, especially with the knee swelling, and he's got 9 games left that he can miss before being eliminated from the MVP discussion. So it was good to see him playing a back-to-back.
Yeah, you hit it, especially with his knee injury last week. That's always a little bit of a worry. That feels something that can linger. Seems like he's putting in good performances, and you kind of just you want him to stay healthy throughout the year.
Yeah. That's all we got for you guys on this one. Make sure you're following us on the socials at Underground PHI on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Facebook.com/Underground Sports PHI. twitch.tv/underground sports PHI. You can follow Matt on Twitter at Matt Castorina. Follow me at KBIZZL311. Subscribe to the podcast feed on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts in audio form. Let's keep those rolling. Let's get the numbers flowing in audio. It really helps us continue to grow, helps more people find the show, and helps us, do more cool and dope things with and for you guys. And of course, subscribe to the Underground Sports Philadelphia YouTube channel, youtube.com/@Underground Sports Philadelphia. It's where you get full video episodes of this show twice a week. Every show on our network, clips, shorts, live streams, you name it. If it's video content, it's on our YouTube channel. We're at 719 subscribers. Let's get to 800 before the end of January as our next goal. And, that push towards 1K continues on. And, of course, get your merch, phiapparel.co, code underground for 10% off your order. And this show is presented by the City of Vineland. And whether you're a company looking to expand, relocate, or you're a new business startup, selecting the right location is critical to your success. Vineland, New Jersey offers both an affordable business location and an excellent quality of life. The city's economic development department is a one-stop source for moving your project through the development and approval process. And their goal is to make this process as smooth as possible and to provide the fastest turnaround times in the region. If you're considering potential locations for your operation, contact the Vineland Economic Development Team at 856-794-4100. That's 856-794-4100. Vineland, New Jersey, where it's always growing season. And big thank you to Security 21 Security Systems and Paul J. Gillespie Incorporated for their continued support of this podcast. It's been episode number 604 of Underground Sports Philadelphia. For Matt, I'm KB. We'll see you guys on the next one, but until then, we're getting the heck up out of here, and we are signing off. Peace.